Oh, yes, this brings back memories. I remember this column very vividly. This is when it all started for me, like all going downhill. Now, I think actually looking back at 10 years, it's a lot of stuff has happened in 10 years. The most important thing for me is that I got married. That's important for me. The other thing that is probably important, we did a lot of different things, right? Kind of really exploring things. And I remember being very naive 10 years ago. That I remember vividly. I was thinking that this entire world is circling around, I don't know, carousels, accordions, things like that. And I was looking up the description of the talk that I was given 10 years ago on the stage. It was all about responsive design and what it is and how to deal with responsive design and some tricks to do that. Remember the times we started having conversations about responsive design back then? Now, looking now, I think many things have changed for me. Many things have changed because now many ways of how I think about design has dramatically shifted. Because over the last 7 years or so, 5 to 7 years, I got involved in projects which are very different and really, really complicated. And that's pretty much what I want to kind of look at today, at design through the lens of this complexity, like this. Right? Anybody feels pleasure looking at this or so? So like for a long time, I was really not excited going to dentists, but now I am. Because once you start looking at interfaces they're using, this is incredible. It's just so impressive. And when you look at this, does it look complex to you, anyone? Yeah, a little bit, maybe. Well, we're not experts maybe in that domain. We don't know what it is, right? There's a lot of stuff, a lot of data, a lot of ways to manipulate data. Or something like this. Anybody feels like home here? 57 filters, right? A table which actually has 8,515 right, entries, and now that's a drop-down, right? Just to make it a bit more dramatic here, that is the biggest drop-down in the world. I went through all of them. That's the one, right? But then you get to these places like, nice, nice. Now this is kind of the environments where I usually work, right? One of the more difficult ones was this one. So redesign it. So you get this wonderful PDF, right? And you have to translate it into a wonderful first-class digital experience. Now, first of all, you learn how to copy-paste. That would be important, right? And then from there, you kind of move on. Now, for the last 4 years altogether, my biggest project was the European Parliament's website, which, of course, is a really, really big site with 190 plus different websites living under the umbrella of European Parliament. And then, of course, the big ambition is to bring all of this into one, very much following gov.uk example many years ago. That's like a really, really ambitious project. And it's actually like the very first part of it is going to go live in June next year. So a lot of stuff happening there. All of these projects have one thing in common, right? All these things have in common that many things that we think about when we're designing are not really applying there at all. For example, one rule I learned very quickly is that white space doesn't exist in those environments. Right? Very often, white space is just not a thing, right? But also, another thing which actually has become quite difficult for me, every time I walk in an organization of that size or at that scale, I realize that nobody really has a profound trust in my work. Anybody feel, okay, you don't have to raise your hands, but maybe you feel like you are doing your work, be it as a designer, be it as an engineer, but everybody's like looking around, is like, is he or she doing the right thing? Do they know what they're doing? Is it the right person? This is kind of how I felt most of the time, because you walk in, and there are maybe 20,000 people, right? And you cannot just tell 20,000 people how to do their work. So every time I walk in, I have to prove the value of what I'm working on. I have to prove that the impact that I'm going to kind of make with my design decisions, right, is going to contribute to what the business actually wants us to achieve. And this brought me to this idea of looking at design KPIs. This is not the most exciting thing ever, but this is kind of how things came to be, and I had to learn what it even means. For example, the question that I was asked in one of the interviews is, how do you define design success? Is it just that all JIRA tickets are completed? Probably not. How do you define engineering success? Or the success of engineering teams? What does it mean? Is it just like 99.9 uptime? Is it really it? So I had to really dive in, and I couldn't find any information, so I started looking deeper. And I want to look at this today, looking into what kind of impact we as designers or engineers can make, then looking into some of the metrics we could use to actually track how well we're performing, Then the design KPIs, or key performance indicators, that we usually establish in organizations like that to track that we're actually getting better with design. This also then grows into something like design KPI trees, where we try to connect the business objectives with design initiatives. And then ultimately, how do you actually measure success over time as time passes by? Anybody excited about it? Yes. Anybody wants chocolate? I brought some. Anyone? I am going to throw. Okay, I just don't see anything because of the light. Anybody else? Duck, if you don't want one. Okay, this is impossible. Oh, okay, I'm going to stop now. But there is chocolate here, so you can actually take it later. That might be, I don't see anything here, so let's not do that. Do we have insurance here, Mark? No, excellent. So I better stop doing that, right? Okay, so let's dive in. And let's start really with kind of looking in what is our role. Again, I'm talking here specifically about UX because I'm kind of seeing myself as UX designer, right? But you can also see it in the same way to applying to engineering. So what is our role? What is the impact that we can actually make? Now, I don't know about you, but most organizations I've been working with, they operate in a very, agile environment where everything is everywhere. Everything is a little bit chaotic. We're moving one place to another. Eventually, there is time pressure, and then we need to deliver, and then we need to rework, and then we need to cut corners, and then we need to move around. But then we bring people in, and we don't have confidence in what they're going to produce, and then we need to kind of do the best you can and go over, and it's always a little bit messy. So the first thing I always do is try to understand how they work. Because, of course, it's very difficult to just grasp a document saying, these are the ways of working. So the first thing I learned to do, to understand what impact I can make, is looking at these wonderful org charts. Anybody excited about org charts? Yes, my kind of people, right? Collect them, group them, like create a group, LinkedIn group, right? Org charts. And of course, when you look at it, you need to understand where your place is in this hierarchy. You need to establish relationships with people on that hierarchy. You need to understand where you are. So, of course, when you look at this, what I see now are people. That's not surprising. People who have dogs, children, dentist appointments. They don't care about me. And why should they? They don't care about my work. Why should they? Right? They have other things. They have their KPIs, they have their business goals, and so on and so forth. And I need to be kind of respectful of their time and their needs. And in many ways, if somebody is living all the way in here on that level, all the way on the top, right? I kind of need to make sure that the work I'm doing has a chance to propagate all the way to the top to make an impact, right? We can, of course, make a little change in filters over here, but if we don't establish some sort of relationships with people on the top, you will not be able to be successful in that. There was a wonderful talk by Andy Budd, who was speaking about the impact of design, and he was speaking specifically about business priorities which we could frame our design into to really make impact. There are basically 5 things that most businesses care about. They want to increase revenue, they want to decrease costs, they want to increase new business, increase existing business, and also increase shareholder value. Now, it might seem very daunting, like you're adjusting filters over here, or you're fixing a bug over there. How can you increase shareholder value as a result of that, right? So we need to kind of really break it down and kind of connect, really, the business goals that we have with design initiatives that we track, right? And Andy was going in saying, okay, well, let's go a little bit further down, right? Because ultimately, your design work can have a direct impact on acquisition, retention, engagement, customer satisfaction, and also customer service, right? There was also the wonderful talk which I think it was given at a leading design conference by Paul Adams, in which he was speaking about the role that we as designers and engineers actually in general have. Because of course, when you look around on LinkedIn and on Twitter and on whatever else, right, you find this. This is kind of something that you will find everywhere. UX is the heart of everything. It's that one golden thing that connects us all, unites us all, brings together technology, business, and design, which is not true at all, right? That's not true. I've never seen it in any company or any organization of any size. That's not true. It's a much more realistic kind of approximation of that would be something like this, right? Where design and engineering are just one of the many other satellites that are circling around leadership, right? So, there is actually a good reason why for a given designer, there are maybe 7 engineers in the company and maybe 25 people in sales, right? This is very clearly reflects the priorities that this company organization has. But we often find ourselves in this ironic situation, like we're thinking, oh, well, marketing, what do marketing people do? Well, they take what we create with all our love and passion for design and for the users, and they just basically announce it. Well, that's all we do, right? And then when we look into sales, well, do you have any friends in sales? Just think about it for a moment. Sales are these people, you know, we don't want to talk to sales. They're just overselling. They're making our life difficult. They totally overpromise. They give us deadlines we cannot commit to. Impossible to work with, but have good parties. So you might want to hang out for a while, right? HR, well, people problems. I hope I'm not going to talk to them ever, right? So we kind of have these stereotypes around this, which I think, of course, is wrong, right? And of course, again, when you look at this, for example, sales, marketing have much more impact, direct impact on business, right? Which is why they actually are bigger most of the time, which is why they're also going to be more valued, right? So again, design is not the heart of everything, it's just one of the many satellites. And as Andy was saying, design doesn't matter anywhere near as much as most designers think, but it matters much more than most executives think, right? And again, I think that's one thing that's really, really important. We always think about the process and the workflows, and we'll talk about the double diamond, but this is not real either. I'm yet to work in a company that is following double diamond, actually. If anything, it's a reverse double diamond, as Andy was also writing, where you basically start not with a problem, finding a solution all the way with this rigorous method and research. You're given a solution to a problem, build this, or design this, and then you do your best. Right? Then you do your best. And then eventually you have an MVP launch, and then you keep going and refining. And then you maybe can make a circle or loop, and then you come back, right? So this is, again, much more realistic. So why am I speaking about this? Well, for a very simple reason. Whenever we're speaking about design, we need to understand that, first of all, we are not the center of the universe, right? And on the other hand, we rely on other people a lot. So there's a wonderful book by Leah Bulle about the user experience team of one, which is writing that good design execution is all about relationship management. You will need to find your allies everywhere in the organization because they will be carrying your design in action, right? So why am I talking about this now? Well, because now that we know where we are, we need to know what we can, how we can actually make some impact. And this brings us to the notion of design and UX metrics, right? Because we need to understand how do we measure design in general. I mean, design is not art, right? It's not supposed to be hanging somewhere in a museum. Design is something that solves a problem. So if you take two designs that solve a problem, you probably need to be able to find a way to say that one design is better or worse in solving that problem. And of course, I'm not talking about those kind of things. This is not what I'm talking about at all. Like this kind of metrics, dashboards, that doesn't matter. What we are, here we go, it starts. Nice. What we are talking about is a little bit different. Right? That specifically means tapping into what businesses measure and looking at how we can actually contribute to that. This is what most businesses will measure in one way or the other. Many things are not related to design. I find it actually really annoying and frustrating at times. For example, when I think about session duration here, right? Session duration, bounce rates. Session duration doesn't mean that you have a good experience or bad experience. So it might be that somebody's staying on a website for a long time because they like this experience or because they don't find what they need to find. It might be that the session duration is very short, not because the website is horrible and people just leave, but because the answers are right there. So why should they stick around? But many companies and many dashboards, you will find this session duration and also bounce rates, the same story. If people find answers quickly, they leave. Like on the European Parliament website, nobody hangs out like, oh, let's take a look what else European Parliament has to offer. That sounds like a nice place to spend like another 15 minutes or so. That usually just doesn't happen, right? People just want answers. And then there are all of those things. I'm pretty confident that most of your companies, where you're working, will be measuring number 10, the Net Promoter Score, the NPS, also known as the devil, right? And you probably have seen NPS. This is wonderful, beautiful surveys and journeys like, how likely are you to recommend X to a friend or colleague on a scale from 0 to 10, right? How likely are you to recommend HubSpot on a scale from 0 to 10? How likely are you to recommend Loom on a scale from 0 to 10? How likely are you to recommend everything on a scale B2C, right, on a scale from 0 to 10? Well, the problem is that very often it also accommodates, like there is also a text area, a text box next to it. And some people, I encountered this situation, some people write, you need to understand that I don't gather around with my family and my friends to talk about B2C tools. That just doesn't happen, right? It's just not real. And very often you will find these really strange scenarios where we're just so obsessed with it, and businesses usually really do care, right? They really do. And so what I try to do is kind of frame my design work as an improvement of NPS, even although it's totally statistically unreliable and almost useless in many ways, right? And it's also funny, because 52% of people who actively discouraged others from using a brand had also actively recommended it for a particular attribute. People can't stand some brands, but use them due to their low prices, right? A good example for that is Ryanair. So you would never recommend Ryanair to a friend, but you use it, but you just don't tell anyone, right? This is kind of how it works, right? So very often you end up in this situation as well. So NPS is not reliable. There are alternatives. There was a wonderful article that Anna Debenham has written on alternative NPS for her specific use case, which was DevTools, where she was asking better questions. For example, instead of how likely are you to recommend something, because it's kind of you're asking somebody to predict the future. People are really bad at predicting the future, but we're very good in knowing, well, most of the time, what the past experience was like. So boot research is always rooted in the past, not in the future. So you could, of course, rephrase it and say, if you were to move to a different team or company that wasn't using our product, right, how likely would you be to recommend it? That's a little bit more useful. It's a useful signal for sales. It's also a useful signal for product teams, of course, right? But what would be even better is to, again, look at the past. In the last 6 weeks, have you referred or mentioned product name to a friend or colleague, yes or no, right? Or as a new subscriber, were you referred to us by a friend or colleague, yes or no? Or if you want to test something, how good it is, right? Was your onboarding fast and on point? Yes or no, right? That's actually just much more actionable, much more valuable in many scenarios, right? But again, this is kind of just an example of what we can do with NPS. What we measure, what we started measuring over the last, like let's say, 5-6 years, kind of maybe 4 to 5 metrics that come from this list. Most of the time, it will be all around task success, how successful people are in completing the tasks that they need to complete, the time they need to actually get it done. Sometimes, depending on the project, you will have situations where you want to track how many errors people make and how quickly people recover from those errors. But these two will be always a part of what I'm going to include. On top of that, there is also a frustration score, which is kind of a combination of accessibility issues, usability issues, kind of the regular things that we often will want to improve. And on top of that, also SUS, or System Usability Scale, with all the different metrics, with different variants of that. But there are, of course, many other things that we could be tracking. For the one that I mentioned, the SUS, if you haven't seen it, it looks like this, right? We basically get this calculator. You have 10 questions that are being asked, right? And they're actually written in a specific order. There is a positive statement following negative statement, positive statement, negative statement. You can say, well, I think I would like to use this website frequently, or I found the website unnecessarily complex, right? 10 questions, they can even be simplified. You don't need 10. You can get away with 5 or so, right? There are different variants of that as well. But you kind of can qualify your user experience. You give people tasks, representative tasks that they do in that environment, and you see if they're successful or not. You see how many mistakes they're making, right? And also after that, you give them the form, and they give you the answer to these questions, and you get a number. 68 is average. Anything below 68 is considered to be pretty bad, right? Anything below 40 is considered to be horrible. Anything below 10 is considered to be a disaster, right? And anything beyond 68 or 80 is considered to be good. So you can actually measure design quite efficiently by looking at how effective people are in completing their tasks. Does that make sense, everyone? Right? Right? So that's actually quite cool. That's quite neat. Let's keep going, because this is only kind of the part of the story. The question is, how do we track other things, for example, right? How do we establish it like an entire organization? And this brings us to the notion of KPIs. Because there are different metrics, and again, these are the 4 that I would always use: completion times, how fast people are in completing those tasks, errors, system usability scale, right, and frustration score, right? I want to show you how it all fits together. Now, if I show you this design, right? You might like it, you might not like it, but that shouldn't matter. This should not be a matter of opinion, right? So you can always find a reason why you like it or why not, right? But again, I want to remove this personal subjectivity from the equation at all, right? We could say, oh, this is great because now you can just click. Just is the most difficult and most ridiculous word ever, right? Just click, right? And you can say, oh, it's so well organized, right? You would need to type and the keyboard would show up and you would make mistakes. You just click, right? Oh, here's another example. Oh, this is something I will never forget in my life. You type in the date of your birth. I assume that most of you know what your date of birth is, right? But here, I needed 53 seconds. 53 seconds to fill in that wonderful, beautiful input because I have to go through decades, right? I need to look it up in a calendar. I need to find out, was the Friday or Thursday? I don't remember anymore. So you go in and you say, okay, hold on, but I need to go to 1985. How do I do that? Okay, right, so how do I do that? All right, so I got right, I can scroll. I can scroll. So you go to 1985, reminding yourself in your journey just how old you are at this point. And then you are February. Okay, what is the Friday? Here we go. Now I know it, right? 53 seconds to fill in the date of birth. Maybe a little bit too much. I mean, it could be probably a bit faster with the text box alone. Then we get to this situation, right? Again, similar problem. Date and time of departure. I mean, yeah, we could. We are designers. We can do whatever we want, right? We can create worlds. And somebody in the meeting would say, it's great. It's everybody understands what clock is like, right? They have a clock in the room somewhere. So that's the easiest. People just get it, right? They won't understand it, right? Yeah, but do we need to do it this way? Because, we could just have a text box, right? That might be better. Or this. I mean, why stop there, right? Sure, this is a constructor of dates. Let's play it again, right? So you basically go in and say, well, I want to type in the date of my birth, 1956, September 27th, right? And again, if I ask you now, is it a good design, is it a bad design? I'm pretty sure that most of you will say this is a horrible design. Anybody agrees with that? Yes? And you would be wrong. Oh, that was a really bummer. You should never do that in a talk, right? Because it's an incredible design. It's an impeccable design. It's a beautiful design. It's a wonderful design. It's an extremely effective design for one specific use case. For one specific use case. Because it was designed for the public library in the US, where people need to register books. So they scan a QR code, and then they need to type in the date of indexing, right? And so, of course, they're much faster if they just have this in front of them with a QR code button on the top. They scan, construct, and that's it. That improved their speed of interaction by 30%. That's an incredible design for them, right? But not for everyone, right? So when we're talking about the design KPIs, right, it's really the matter of, okay, what context do we have? What problem are we solving? How do we solve it well? So for the European Parliament, for example, we had to establish a big bunch of those different KPIs for different teams. This is not, of course, one thing that only one team will be tracking, right? But this is just a lot of stuff right here that different teams will be responsible for. One important part is, just to give you an example, is search results quality. Very often it's, search results, or the quality of search is measured just by how up-to-date a search engine is, which is absolutely irrelevant. The worst thing you can do to improve search is to replace a search engine from old to a new one. That's probably not going to change anything. Most of the time, search issues come from a lot of poor metadata, a lot of duplication, a lot of legacy, and things like that, right? So what we did is, for the search results quality, we said, all right, let's take a look at all the different search engines that we have, and we're going to track top 100 search queries that came our way per year. So we looked at the top 100 search queries that came our way in 2022. And then we went with that to editorial teams for different departments in the parliament, right? Can you give us a list of, free URLs that should appear, like canonical URLs, that should appear when people are searching for those things today. So they give us a list, 300 or so, or else, right? And then we do the mapping. Okay, from what we have currently on the website that is actually showing up in search results, and what we currently have recommended by editorial, what is the overlap? And you'll be not surprised that most of the time it's very, very low. If you want to improve search quality, we can measure it continuously over time by looking, okay, top 100 search queries last year, where do we stand now editorial-wise, what is the mapping? And this is how the search team will be measured by. Not by how up-to-date the search engine is, but how good search quality, search results are in terms of quality, right? And of course, you will be planning for it. So it'd be like Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, that you will be actually improving over time. It's a very evidence-based approach to design. And ultimately, the goal is not to just get to these numbers, which might look like coming out of thin air. The goal is to get to 80% success rate. That's kind of a good industry standard that you want to get for your key performance indicators, for your OKRs, if you're using OKRs, and so on. And it can be tied, but we haven't discussed that yet, can be tied to bonuses, promotions, and so on, because then you have an actual motivation to improve things like search, navigation, and so on, right? That actually can be quite impactful and quite useful. Relatively quickly, I have to say. That's not it, though, because we need to keep going, right? We have now a few metrics that we have picked. We now have some KPIs, like things that are important. Like maybe we will pick 3 or 4 or 5 of them, depending for the department that we're working. But we also need to kind of explain to business what the hell we're doing. Because very often design is not seen as, it's not very clear what the impact of design really is. Now, we know our place, but we still need to create that connection. And this is where I started using KPI trees. The KPI trees look something like this, and they're coming from marketing and sales. Most people from marketing or sales team, they will feel very comfortable with those kind of things because they actually do this almost all the time, right? Make friends with your sales and marketing teams. By the way, it's very important to understand that sales, as we probably see it as people who are really like overselling and making things very difficult for us, promising too much and so on and so forth, they have changed a lot over the last decade. Now, many of the products that we're creating have moved from this idea of, you buy once and you forget about it, to you buy once and then you pay monthly because it's a subscription. But because it's a subscription, I would say that today, sales and UX have much more in common than they ever have. Because sales care about relationship with those customers. They care about success of those customers because they keep paying, and they want to keep them to keep paying for month and month ahead. So I think in many ways, the goals that UX designers, right, and salespeople have are almost the same at this point, which is fantastic, right? So if you actually do have conversations with sales around that, you'll find that this is something that you can start working on. And this is what we ended up creating, something along the lines of this, right? Well, you maybe have tapped a success rate. Remember, this was one of the KPIs that I showed, where you want to get to at least 80% success rates in the most important tasks that people do. And then you break it down, thinking, what does it mean, right? On the one hand, it means that people need to be able to complete tasks, right? If you want them to be successful, they need to be able to complete those tasks, right? On the other hand, if they encounter errors, they need to be able to recover from those errors. That also means that when we look into content, right, and we call it content health score, just to avoid repetitions, avoid duplications, improve metadata, things like that, we can track it as well. And then, of course, there are things like accessibility, usability, and so on. And these yellow boxes represent design initiatives that we're suggesting or prompting to improve those KPIs. And then you go down, right? If you want to improve time to complete, what does it mean? Well, we need to do something like a navigation tree testing to see if people are actually successful with it or not. Maybe increase the usage of filters. Maybe look again at search results quality, top 100 queries in 2023, right? And these are then the initiatives that we're going to take in order to get this done or improved, right? For example, we need to iterate on tree testing and then test. We need to revisit filtering UX and then see if it actually improves or not. And then you need to improve refined SERPs, right, to expose critical and timely content right here as well. And the same goes for the other places as well. And then we started doing this, and it really got to the point where it became really kind of a really useful alignment tool for the entire organization. So now it's not just a design thing. We bring developers on board, we bring a PM on board, we bring designers on board, we bring sales on board, and then we do this, right? And this happens before we start designing anything. right? So this happens when we get these business objectives. Like if anybody working with OKRs, objective key results, maybe. So you get this big fluffy objective that nobody understands what it actually means. And then out of that, you get these key results of things that you actually want to improve, right? So we get this big objective. Like for example, here on the top, this is from one of the projects, improve time to premium. So people subscribe faster to premium, right? Then you sit down with all the different individual parts and you think about what it actually means. Because if you think about improving time to premium, well, customers probably should faster recognize the value of premium. People don't buy if they don't see value in things, right? Unless it's like an impulsive reaction to like a new product or something like that. And what does it mean? Well, again, the same story. They need to be successful, right? They need to be successful in what they're doing. And these badges represent metrics, business metrics that business cares about. This is why we bring PM on board, or business analyst if you have one in-house, right? So this is a monthly recurring revenue here that we want to improve. This is a customer lifetime value. If we improve time to success, right, then the customer lifetime value will be hopefully getting better as well. This is a bit of a hunch. You need to validate it over time and see if it's getting better indeed. But that's kind of the idea. So what does it mean? Time to success gets better? Well, gets reduced? Well, that means that first of all, people need to be successful. And second of all, because it's time to success, well, they need to be able to we need to be able to reduce time they need to complete those tasks. How do we do that? Well, maybe we can improve presets, or improve the number of managed portfolios, or improve the usage of filters. So all those things could be kind of driving different parts. Sometimes they might be contradictory, right? And then here at the very bottom, you see this kind of a design initiatives that we are suggesting to improve that. Enhance onboarding, add options, and so on. And here in between, this is the glue. This is the glue between the business goals that you have on the top and design initiatives you have at the bottom. Because we need to make sure that whenever we're suggesting something, we need to track the impact of it. It's not just, let's move pixels around. We need to track the impact of that. That means that when we add options to import portfolios in bulk, how do we measure how successful it is? Well, we track the percentage of free tier users who add maybe more than 10 portfolios in the first week. So we know that, okay, if this number goes up, then we are successful at this point. And then we need to track and see if it's actually going to propagate all the way to the top until you get here, and then here, and then here. And it can see, as you can see here, you can have a lot of different branches. This is the frustration score I was talking about. We have different things coming together. The system usability scale score, the interaction delays, bounce rates on entry pages, and so on. And it could also be coming from marketing again. That's not just a design thing. It's kind of becoming the organizational tool thing. And I cannot emphasize how useful that is. I mean, you do that once, you have the really incredible sense of alignment for the entire organization, at least for your departments, because everybody understands why the hell we're doing what we're doing, right? Both in designers and developers and everybody else. This is extremely powerful. It really, really is, right? And so you get to this, which needs to get signed off. And once it's signed off, and once you remove some of the trenches, because probably not everything will be possible, right? Then you start working on designing and engineering and everything else. It's kind of just maybe 1.5 to 2 weeks journey that you take to make sure that you're actually working on the right things, right? Anybody excited about this? No anymore. I still have chocolate, I was prepared for this because when I start bringing this kind of in the conversation, people are like, give me a break, give me a break. Well, here's a break. So anybody wants a chocolate? Maybe outside of the light? Anybody? Oh, okay. Anybody else? Oh, I'm getting better. Okay, I'm getting used to this environment here. Maybe just one more. I have like five or so left. Anybody? Oh, I can do that. All right, excellent. Fantastic, so that worked. All right, so just a few things before we kind of to bring it home at this point. Now, ultimately, all of this is part of the process, and then really the final bit is to make sure that we are tracking design success over time as time passes by. And this is where we need to measure how successful we are, right? We need to at least understand that we're in the right direction. So I have this checklist of like 12 questions that I always bring up when we're actually starting working on something similar, something like this. And these are the questions. You will get them, of course, in the deck as well. How are design priorities defined? How do we translate business goals into design tasks? How are they currently defined and assigned? How do we decide what to work on the next sprint? And a few others. We just need to have answers to those questions. And then, what can we actually measure? Some things we cannot, right? And what do we want to measure? And out of this comes the task performance indicator. Now, this is methodology that was suggested by Jerry McGovern. I'm working with him on the European Parliament, so I'm very, very happy and privileged to be working with him. And the idea is very simple. And this is something that we started working on and implementing in every organization. Ultimately, what we want to create is a stable, reliable, repeatable metric to test how successful people are in completing things that they need to be able to perform in a given environment. It doesn't have to be navigation or search. It could be, setting up portfolios in a project or going through, kind of getting to the first success. This is probably going to be the most important part. And it's always the same story. We focus on two things, as I mentioned, success rate and completion times. Now, sometimes you want to inspire people. That's fine. Sometimes the landing page will be more to inspire people, but then to bring them to conversion as well at some point, right? But ultimately, it's about how you define success for the customer and the completion time of the task that they're performing. So how do we do that? Really easy. You don't need a lot of people. That's the best part. Between 15 to 18 participants, task success rate, when you bring people in and you give them tasks to complete, begin to stabilize. So you need 15 to 18 people to get to very, very stable results. But you need to make sure that you actually get good segments of users, right? So obviously, when it comes to users, you need to understand where people are coming from. And specifically, in our case, you need to rely on people who are using the website or product a lot, people who are not using the website a lot, different ranges, different ages, different countries, potentially, right? And what you're going to do is you establish it once, and then every 6 to 8 months, you bring people in of the same segment, different people, but of the same user segment, and test with them again, right? Typically, you will not have more than 3 profile segments, and usually you would need 30 to 40 participants to commit, because many of them will not show up, right? So you ultimately need to get at least 15 to 18 people. This is why you always need to get double the amount of time, double the amount of people that you're going to get assigned, right? And then we define tasks. 10 to 12 tasks that they are supposed to fulfill or complete within a given hour. Usually you don't need more than 1 hour for every person. And here are a few examples of that, right? OECD is one of the organizations, or they're one of the larger ones. You can do a couple of things there. You can receive statistics, browser publication online, access papers, and things like that. So these were the task questions for that environment. If you look at them, they all have something in common, right? What are OECD's latest recommendations regarding Japan's healthcare system? In 2018, was Vietnam on the list of countries that received official development assistance? Right? These are very specific questions that expect one and only one right answer, but there could be many incorrect answers. The important part is it's not about finding a page. I've been involved now in hundreds of usability sessions over the last years. And people find the right page, but it doesn't mean that they find the answer, because it could be convolutedly hidden on that page, right? So these questions are representative. That, again, something that needs to be checked in on the higher level and signed off, because this is something you're going to do and ask every time you bring people in. And then you run the test, right? How do you do that? Well, you need, again, 10 to 12 questions. You will need about 1 hour per person. Remote works really well. We usually just set up Zoom. I do not encourage people to turn on the camera, video, because people don't want to be watched, right? But we do ask the permission to record the screen and also audio. But audio is not as important as we once thought. For example, these are the rules that Jerry has established over the years. No talk aloud protocol. Now, normally, most articles around will speak about talk aloud. Let users explain what they're doing as they're doing it. Now, this is not real, again, because people first of all slow down when they speak through the experience, which is, again, reduces this task completion times relevance, right? And on the other hand, people often say things that they don't really know if are true or not, because they want to please you. They want to be successful. So it's very common, like after maybe 3 or 4 sessions or tasks, that somebody says, "How am I doing? How am I doing it? Did I get it all right so far or not?" Well, obviously, as a researcher, you should never answer that question, right? But they're like, "I really want to be good at this. And like, this is not the point. I just want you to fail as much as you can, so I know that you are failing, right? You don't have to please me, right? So that's the important part. So this is why no talk allowed, no guidance, no hints, no ongoing conversations, no smiling. That's very difficult for me most of the time. No judgment. That's not very difficult for me most of the time. No answers, no confirmations, no background noise, and as realistic as possible. And then you get to evaluation. Creating charts like this, right? Where you maybe have, first of all, like the overall distribution, success rate, and failure rate, right? For each of the tasks, we repeatedly create results in charts and make them visible throughout the organization. So we have this average success time that we're measuring. It's literally like, timestamps on Zoom. That's all, right? And then you see failure, 40% in this particular case, right? Also, as you can see, like this is usually going to look very much like this, and this is what we present to management, right? Every time once we've completed doing this research. So if we actually improve design, these numbers should improve as well. That's very clear. So it's not like, let's discuss it, and maybe people didn't understand the question. Well, we'll go for the same questions every time. So it's not like it's a matter of discussion. So we have success rate and failure rate. We have success rate and failure rate. We measure the time. And then obviously, if we are doing good work, then it should be getting better over time. This could be applied to many different scenarios. This is the one for calculating a deposit in an insurance company. The same story exactly. It's the same story. And you do it continuously. So every 6 to 12 months, depending on the velocity of the team and how quickly you can deploy and ship, we measure this top task again, and it gives us kind of an insight of how well we're doing. And ultimately, again, the main goal that we perform there is to get like to 80% success rate, at least, for all these main tasks. Right? In many ways, by the way, it's very similar to what happens in software engineering anyway. Because when we think about testing, like unit testing, things like that, kind of in many ways apply this to the concept of UX, right? And whenever, planning poker, anybody has t-shirt sizes, planning poker for estimating complexity, right? We kind of do something very similar, but in a very different way, again, applying it to the context of UX. Okay, this was dense. Right? So wrapping up, and I'm on time. This is the first time in history when it happened. Wow, I'm seriously impressed here. Mark told me yesterday, we're having a chat, and he's saying, well, the first day was so strong, was so good. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I really have to really work with it. And he says, yeah, you better improve it, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try my best to improve it. So, as a summary, I think it's very useful for us to be successful that design is seen as an enabler of goals above us, business goals. Of course, there is never enough user research or UX research in general, right? So if we can ask for it, we should be asking for it, but sometimes we just won't get the privilege of doing a lot of research. Ultimately, what we try to translate for each vertical in teams, because usually we have different verticals, the search team, the product landing page team, and so on, right? We want to translate business objectives into design ideas or design initiatives, and then we also need to transform design ideas that we come up with a way of measuring how successful they are, and this will become our KPIs. Of course, we need to identify user segments and identify what are people doing in our environment, right? We need to track this top task success rate with TPI. There are many ways of actually getting sentiment from users using Kano model, RISE, and story mapping, right? Involve as many people as you can when you're creating this design KPI tree. And then ultimately, usually it will be PM, it could be also a business analyst who is going to break down KPIs into epics, initiatives, and ultimately they become your team's OKRs, if you like. And in the end, this is actually quite impactful. I haven't spoken about governance because nobody wants to talk about governance, but it's important that once you establish this framework, that it's very clear how you're going to track and the performance of teams as well. So they're actually going to get benefits or promotions or anything very much based on how well they are meeting their KPIs. All right, so I've put a lot of this stuff and much more in this little video course that we've been putting together for the last few years. Smart Interface Design Patterns. If you're interested, you can take a look, right, and get a friendly coupon and stuff right here as well. There's a lot of stuff in there, so every year I'm bringing 5 new chapters, video chapters to it as well, so it kind of grows over time. There is no subscription, you just pay once and you get it all done, and that's it, right? And if you want to get some of this stuff for free, there's also a blog that we launched where there's a lot of UX stuff as well. By the way, Not everybody knows, nobody knows. We created 3 different animations for different time of the day. Right? Nobody has spotted it yet. That was so frustrating, actually, because it's like I had to write down all the different dishes that would be in that plate, right? For breakfast, for lunch, and for the dinner, and nobody noticed. That's actually a little bit sad. So if you want to follow along, and you can go in breakfast time, during the lunchtime, which is coming up now, and also during the dinner time, and you will see different animations. So I want to leave you with just one final video, which is like 60 seconds, and that's it, right? All these things that we tried to do came from my frustration, because I felt like I cannot really show the value of what I'm doing. I find it very difficult to explain. I often have to prove what I'm doing and that I'm doing the right thing. And that was really, really unsatisfying on so many different levels. This might seem like too much and too complex and all. It probably won't apply to every organization, every company. But oh my, I have to tell you, it really brought me to the place where I felt much more comfortable as a designer to do design work and also show my value. And that was very valuable. Sometimes you still will not be able to get it all right, but we have to try. So welcome to my world for the last 5 or 7 years. I don't have audio, that's okay. Oh. That's just not fair. For designers, well, that's life sometimes, right? Well, huge thanks to Parallel Studio for the wonderful video in here. With it come cats and more cats and more cats and meow, and thank you so much for your attention, and looking forward to your questions now or later. Thank you so much for being here.